Unicorn Roast.
All right, welcome to Unicorn Roast. I'm Emily Forlini, and I'm here with Mike Elgan. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm here in Sicily. If you're watching the video, you can see that I'm in this beautiful Sicilian setting. Emily, you thought this might be like a fake background, but no, this is real. It
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 totally looks fake.
it looks fake. It's actually really cold here right now, but I'm not going to complain. It's really nice
Right.
and peaceful and beautiful here. So yeah.
Well,
So
that's what tipped me off. You're wearing a coat, so I was like, hold on,
exactly. Well,
it can't be fake.
it makes it look even more fake, doesn't it? Because it's like Sicily's supposed to be really hot and warm and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And here I am bundled up like I'm in Maine or something with a fake
You look
background.
a little untrustworthy, I'm going to be honest. Like, it looks like you have a fake background, but you're wearing like a space suit. So it's like, who is this
Exactly.
guy?
Exactly. I'm actually on one of Elon Musk's rockets and pretending to be
Exactly.
on Earth. Well, I wanted to talk about really what I think is, I've always been fascinated by this idea of the fact that we're always recording everything all the time. And I wrote a piece for Computer World about the sort of the Halliday glasses, which we talked about before. And I kind of got into the details about all the things it does. And it's a proactive AI feature from how they describe it, because it wasn't ready at CES to demonstrate, listens all the time and does things for you. It can fact check the things the person is saying. It can give you cultural, if somebody makes a cultural reference and you don't get it, it will sort of explain the cultural reference. A bunch of things like that. And I think that's pretty great, but it's capturing voice. And, you generally need permission if you're going to record a conversation that you're having with somebody. I know that it's state by state in terms of the telephone. In California, where I'm from, you have to inform the other person that you're recording the call if that's what you want to do. Of course, we journalists have to know this stuff because we're always talking to people on the phone and recording those calls. And I wonder about that. Like, I wonder why we really need permission to, we definitely need permission to record somebody who's in a private setting or, that sort of thing. But if you are having a conversation with somebody and you obviously have the legal right to remember it in your own mind, in your own memory, and you don't need permission to remember something. And we're getting to the point where there are wearables, including glasses like Halliday glasses and many other wearables. There's a wristwatch and so on that record voice just as life logging to do meeting notes, to do all these different kinds of things. And it's really prosthetic memory. It's basically using electronics to help your memory, and it's akin to eyeglasses. So if you and I are looking at the same thing and you have great vision and I have horrible vision, it's okay
Probably
for me
true.
to put on glasses and see it as clearly as if I had great vision. And likewise, if you and I are having a conversation, you have a photographic memory and I have a shit memory. It seems like it should be okay for me to get some help with remembering things. I actually have a really good memory, but I'm just saying, as a matter of principle, could we get to a point where it's okay to have a listening device helping you remember things? What do you think about that?
Really interesting. I hadn't thought about this, and I do come at it from the same place of just as a journalist, you are legally obligated in certain states, my state of New Jersey also, to disclose. And that's something, I mean, I went to Northwestern Journalism School. I got my master's degree there. We had professors we had ethics courses. We studied Supreme Court cases. We had to learn about libel and all the laws in the US. And the recording law really makes a difference in how the cases are processed because it's what's legal in that state, and it has a big impact on, it historically has had a big impact. I think it is in general, I would like to know if I'm being recorded, especially if I'm having a conversation with a journalist, just for personal boundaries and just a feeling of betrayal if you're being recorded and then it's published and you don't know about it. And I think it's natural that something like that would have tension with a private sector AI product. which would function better with more data, always data, data, data hungry. And of course, there is a risk to make people feel violated. And, that's why we have laws, is to work out that tension. Like, what's good for business? What's good? How do we protect people? Like, what's the purpose of government? So, um, I still would not necessarily like to be recorded. Of course, Amazon Alexa, I guess, is already doing that. Um,
They love harvesting all the data.
yeah, so that's my thinking, and I'm teasing it out, but I'm
Yeah.
not totally ready to throw out the requirement.
Yeah.
Uh, However, it's not even in place consistently, so maybe it does warrant a refresher on, like, as a society, what do we think about this issue?
Right. And of course, this kind of solution to the kind of usage I'm talking about against the kind of protections you're talking about is that the devices could be engineered in such a way that it doesn't actually capture a voice recording that's accessible to any human being. It could just take the voice recording and quickly convert it to text or quickly convert it to data in some way and then save the data throughout the recording. Nobody wants, you don't want to record things for the sake of having, this thing to listen to later, unless you're a journalist and you want to maybe
Right.
publish it or whatever. But like, for example, we use Riverside to record this podcast. It generates a transcript. And even if you didn't retain the video or the audio, you could have the transcript. And that's really what you want, is you want who said what
Hmm.
and,
But
and
we're
so on. So
opting into this. Like, we are
yes,
choosing to
for
do this,
sure.
so it's very clear that we're recording. But it is
Right.
interesting in the case of, if someone walks up to you at the supermarket and they're wearing Meta Ray-Ban glasses that are recording you, or they
Mm-hmm.
just walk past you, you're getting bread, they're, like, going over you to go get some bagels,
Yeah.
then they're recording you, then you don't know that that happened. So it does raise
Right.
interesting questions.
Right. And but it's like I'll never forget when I was a newspaper reporter a long time ago. I wanted to interview. There was like three people running together for local city council or something like that. And I went to interview them. I pulled out a tape recorder, and they're like, "No, no, no, no. We're not gonna do the interview if you're gonna record it." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because we don't want to be misquoted." And the
Well,
that confused me because it's like that's how
yeah,
you avoid being misquoted. But
yeah,
really, what they
exactly.
meant was that there was an imbalance. Like I would be able to not use, selectively use verbatim quotes from my recording, and they wouldn't have a recording of their own where they could say, well, this was the
Mm,
context or this was the question. You make it seem like we were answering a different question, but you actually answered. So really the best scenario is for both parties in that situation to record. And you talked
yeah.
about the law. The laws exist to protect people's privacy around recording, but they also exist to do the opposite. So, for example, if you were accused of a crime and arrested and interrogated, they would have the right to record the interrogation, and you would not have the right. And so, this is a situation where the legal framework benefits them. They can turn off the recording dramatically, like they do in every
Hmm.
cop show, or they can, do whatever. And you're just like, well, I swear, Judge, he really said X, Y, Z. And there was actually a case in 2007 where some young guy was arrested. He happened to have an MP3 player. He felt like it was kind of a shady interrogation, so he just reached in his pocket and hit record. Nowadays, you would never get away with that kind of stuff. When it came time for the court case, the detective claims he never interviewed him, didn't ask him any questions, lied through his teeth, and the defense produced the recording, and the guy,
Wow.
uh, it lost the case, obviously. But that's a situation where the detectives had a monopoly on recording, and the suspect didn't have any ability to record, and except he did it sneakily, and therefore
Right.
justice was
It was,
served.
Bill, there's an interesting power dynamic too with journalists, where if you record someone without their permission and then disclose it, you might not get in trouble if in court it's deemed in the public's interest.
Right.
So if some, the people who think that like Hillary Clinton's eating babies in a basement, like that crazy
Yeah.
stuff. Like if,
Yeah.
let's say they recorded her saying
Eating
that,
babies.
eating
Oh, okay.
babies, like,
Yes.
love
Yeah.
them, so delicious. I'm in this basement right now eating babies. Then they they didn't get her permission. Then they published it. She couldn't, sue them, or they wouldn't be held accountable
Right.
as journalists because like
Right.
clearly we cannot have government officials doing that, and
Right.
it's in the public interest to disclose that. So there's a lot of funny business or just like leeway, I guess, for the press has power. That's a part of having
Yeah.
a free press.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I but back to the idea of memory enhancements. I've always been fascinated with and written about life logging, where you capture everything from your life, and part of what you have in your life are conversations. That's an important part of life, and I think nobody should have any problem with a device that captures conversations but doesn't retain the recording. Um, and
Yeah.
these things are the slippery slope's the wrong word, but like the phrase, but these things change in terms of the public's acceptance of them. For example, people are taking smartphone photos all the time in every direction. It's guaranteed that all of us are in the background of other people's photos all the time. I mean, I just took a bunch of pictures
Yeah.
yesterday, and there was people there like in the background. I used a brand new feature of Apple Photos for erasing them, but like, I captured them, and nobody gets bent out of shape, right? And people pick up a phone, and are they taking a selfie? Are they capturing the room? Are they taking a picture of me? Are they,
Right.
you don't know, and nobody cares really. It's such a banality, and I think
It's
we will
legal
get.
too. I think it's
It's legal,
legal
yeah.
because you're in a public space. Yeah.
Right. And so why doesn't that extend to audio? So I
Right.
don't know.
Well, it's interesting you brought up last time the live translation tech,
Yeah.
where that you talked about something amazing where if you're wearing glasses and you're an English speaker, you're talking to someone speaking Mandarin, it will, I guess, process their voice and
Right.
convert it to English. And so I guess that's what you're arguing, right?
The
Like
current
that should
state
be
of the
okay.
technology takes
Right.
the recording, records it, uploads it to a
Right.
server, process on the server, and then downloads the translation. And so,
Right.
yeah, and if it's like you say, Amazon is worst offender. They keep those Alexa recordings till the end of time. And they used to have a crazy product called the Fire Phone, and this thing was designed to do all kinds of stuff, but it had a button on it. So if you push the button and talked, it would convert what you said to like some actionable information. Or if you took the same button and took a picture of something, it would tell you about like if you took a picture of a product, if you took a picture of a box of cereal, it would tell you how many calories and all this kind of stuff. It was
Yeah.
a very
Well, Google does
consumer.
that now.
Sure, right,
Google
exactly.
Lens. I mean, all the chatbots are doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, but the Fire Phone, actually, when you took a picture using that button, it also captured 15 seconds of audio and uploaded that. So you're thinking picture, and it's like
What?
just sending the audio. And Amazon really wants all the data so they can figure out how to sell you more stuff on Amazon. I mean, they just really
Right.
do that sort of thing. They have their little home robot project, and that's just harvesting. That's just
Hmm.
they want to find out what your furniture is so they can sell you more furniture and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But
Well,
anyway,
I can get into my quick update on Amazon that I was thinking about doing while we're on it.
okay,
So they released their fourth quarter results, and they are just staggering. I mean, the amount of money they made. It was
yeah,
last year during this time period, they made 10 billion in profit. This year they made 20 billion in profit.
yeah,
And it's pretty much mostly from AWS. So it's
yeah,
even if they're gathering all that data from what you're shopping, like what has been funding the business for years, including when I worked at Amazon, was AWS. And that
yeah,
is why Andy Jassy, who Bezos named as his successor, is the CEO because he started AWS and he's the guy that
yeah,
made it what it is. And really kind of did something amazing. And so, yeah, now he's CEO of Amazon. But
right,
so they're making just outrageous
Bank.
amounts of money. And they said they are putting those extra profits into AI and AI data centers. So they
Yeah.
have $100 billion investment that they announced. So that's what they got going on. I think it's a lot less about what you buy on Amazon and a lot
Yeah.
more about cloud computing.
Yeah. Well, somebody's got to pay for Jeff Bezos's giant yacht, a boat that's
Hmm.
so big that it has its own boat. Like you know about his boat? His boat has a like another boat that like is required for support. Like there's
Oh,
another, so it's a two ship situation. Like first of all, it's the world's largest super yacht, I think.
yeah.
But it's got another yacht that where for landing and taking off with a helicopter and all this other stuff. So anyway, somebody's got to pay
But
for
I
that.
don't
And
even
it's,
want that. Who wants that? You don't need a flotilla. Just relax. It's too much.
billionaires like yachts because it's their own little country. They're
Right.
not everybody's like Elon Musk who actually takes our country. They want their own little country with no laws and like they're sort of the master and commander
Hmm.
out there on the high
Hmm.
seas, and that's why I think billionaires love yachts. So you got a lot. You got
Well,
Emily. You got a lot to learn about being a malignant narcissist. You really do.
I'm when you can teach me.
Thank you. Thank you. That's
You
an
seem to know
excellent.
the ropes. That's what I'm
Thank you so
gathering.
much. Yes.
You're
Yes.
giving me the playbook. I got to get a yacht, and then my yacht needs a yacht. Then my yacht needs a yacht, and
And
I'm
then
good.
you play Yahtzee on your yacht. It goes all the way down.
Then I
Well,
play Yahtzee. Yeah,
anyway,
I'm kidding. So,
enough about my narcissistic
what else do we
personality
have
disorder.
today? No, I'm making fun of you because you said you were mansplaining to your wife, and I thought that was
Yes.
it's just sweet that you're the right kind of guy who could even make fun of yourself for that. So
Yeah.
I have
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely no bones
Yeah.
to
Just
pick.
to fill people in on the conversation, she was binging unicorn roast, and she was like, "Wow, this is great! You guys like, it's a great podcast. I love it. Emily's so smart. Emily's this. Emily's that." I'm like, husband. No, I didn't say that. I was very pleased. I was very pleased all the way around. So no, it was good. And I was joking with you on WhatsApp that I was trying to convince her that all of your good qualities on the podcast are the result of
Hmm.
me. But anyway, I was joking
Hmm.
about that. I didn't even
Well,
say
there's
that to
some
her, just
truth
to
to
you.
it.
No,
Some
not
truth
at
to
all.
it.
Not at all.
All right,
So,
so DEI,
oh
that's our
yeah,
next topic, right?
yeah, it's a
So
four-letter
that's
word.
been Yeah, it's really very controversial and also hard to talk about. There's a lot of emotions and thoughts that people bring to this conversation in their personal lives, but we're talking here about in the corporate world. Does Meta, Amazon, Google have an obligation to try to hire more diverse talent? And that is something that there's a huge shift here. Of course, Trump has required the government to not have things like that. And now we have just seen like dominoes falling. Meta, Google, and Amazon have revoked their DEI policies, but Apple and Microsoft still have them and are pushing back
Yeah.
on any shareholder attempts to get rid of them. So, what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, it's very confusing that private companies, would take a cue from a new presidential administration and say, "Hey, we're throwing all this stuff out the window now. This is awesome." It's like, wait a minute. I thought your press releases talked about how you were committed to this stuff and how you believed in it, and you said all these things. You were lying, Meta. How could you? And
Mm-hmm.
so that confused me that they would just so shamelessly. I never before imagined that or publicly held companies would sort of go along with what presidents. I didn't know that presidents mattered that much to policies and programs implemented by companies. I just never imagined such a thing. The other thing is that it has to be said, and I've covered this topic in various ways over the years. I did a really nice series on a previous podcast, Tech News Today, where I had all these women who were journalists who were writing about this stuff, and we had this like really interesting. And I learned a lot about the whole topic. And
Cool.
one of the things that is interesting is that if you're a racist, if you're a white supremacist, you definitely want DEI, because in the tech world, there's bias. Again, the main bias is against uh, everybody except. Let me reverse that. Without
Mhm.
DEI or some sort of metric for this sort of thing, both in the engineering education and also in Silicon Valley companies, you're going to see 40-45% Asian Americans in these places, right? They represent a vastly lower percentage of the population than that, right? So white
Right.
people are not overrepresented in tech without this stuff. Asian people are, and so there's a like affirmative action for white people, and so I'm not, all this stuff is
Just
um, obscures the fact that the problem isn't at the end point of the hiring. That's not the problem of the lack of diversity. It's the whole culture. It's education, educational opportunities.
yes.
It's all this kind of stuff, and it all started in the '80s, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Computer science was there's so many women in computer science, just on the gender front, right? So many
Hmm.
women. Like, it's famously the moon landing was headed by a woman named Margaret Hamilton, I believe her name was, and it was
Cool.
totally normal, And then in the '80s, nothing happened in the hiring. What happened was the culture. We started getting these hacker movies where women were always portrayed as the hacker's girlfriend, and it's basically, and the toys came out with, they were all, and so the culture did this big shift, where they started dealing with computer culture, and Hollywood made it a male thing, basically,
Mm.
made it a cool thing for men and all this kind of stuff, and that there are many other uh, things that
Yeah.
happen,
Well,
and
also just women getting into. There are just objectively all men who worked pretty much
right,
were. I mean, all roles were men. I mean, women really are just entering the workforce now, so that's a
right,
huge thing.
it
Yeah,
and
just to work in a field, you were male.
Right. Well, I mean, which is amazing, that how many women there were in computer science roles back in the day, and especially in academia, right? So,
Right.
the other thing that's so I would, what I think we need most of all is, we need companies. Well, let me back up, because there's another component of this that's really kind of, nobody talks about this aspect of it. So when you have DEI, and you, especially around gender, like it's harder to do around race and other metrics, but like around gender, one of the ways that Silicon Valley companies fill those roles is they hire women from Asia, right? They go out of their way to hire women from
Yeah.
Asia, and so it's like China and India produce all the female engineers, software engineers, that Silicon Valley could ever want, right? And basically, when you're bringing in people on H-1B visas, you can just choose your gender. You can choose, you have your pick of the lot. So, this is not helping. This is making the situation worse, because the whole point of this, the
Mm.
whole solution to this thing, is to get down to the root cause. Are girls and minorities and minority girls and everybody else who are not white males getting excited about engineering and programming and computers and AI at a young age, and being
Mhm.
cultivated in the same way all the way up through the ranks? That's the problem. And hiring
Right.
Indian women to meet your quota does not help that in any way. And so that's really the big problem. That's what I think about DEI, and it's really, it's a huge, it's a ridiculous problem. I mean, the most underrepresented people, by the way, in Silicon Valley are Hispanics, um, because like
Right.
half the
So
population of
you're in the
California is
camp,
Hispanic.
right? So you're in the camp, which I think a lot of people are kind of coming out now and kind of being like, yeah, I'm not in favor of DEI or quota hiring.
Right. well, no, I'm in the
So
well.
you're
First of
you're
all,
cool.
I'm in the I'm in the camp of like, why is everybody's bedrock principles just flittering in the wind with whatever direction it's going? That's, you either believe
Yeah.
in this stuff or you don't. I tend to think
Right.
that I think the evidence is clear that the successful societies are the ones that maximize diversity. You never know where the talent's going to come from, and the United States fails miserably in developing the talents of different races of girls and women, and it's a shame. If you look at like really
Hmm.
unsuccessful societies, or you reverse that, look at societies where big chunks of the population are completely excluded. Saudi Arabia and women are not really welcome throughout the whole process.
Hmm.
And Saudi Arabia is rich and all that stuff because money comes out of the ground. But this is a country that never won an Olympic medal, that never won a Nobel Prize, that never, this is a failed state, except money comes out of the ground, right? And if they could include women in as much as they include men, they'd be a much more successful country, right? On all the
Hmm.
metrics that matter, and we would be a much more successful country if we did a better job at that as well.
Right.
So that's what I think about DEI. But again, I think the hiring part of it, the DEI initiatives in companies is just it can't fix the
Hmm.
society, right?
I think so. I agree with you. It's pretty unimpressive that people seem to have no consistent value system. That depends on the administration, and also I think a lot of these tech companies, they're donating to Trump's inauguration and things like that. So there's very much a
Yeah.
kiss the ring component. What
Uh,
Google put in its press releases, they said, well, we're a government contractor, so we are complying with the government's new direction. But I think it's very convenient for them because these are hard goals to hit. I know you're saying that, oh, you can just go abroad and pick anyone and meet your quotas, but I don't think it's actually that easy in practice.
because of the H-1B visa program, which is another unresolved issue in the Trump administration. But it's too
Right,
limited
but
to do
it's
that.
yeah, and so yeah, I think it's convenient for them to get rid of hard to reach goals that they've announced publicly and could be held accountable for. Um, I do know that like this really just affects the HR teams. So in their day to day, they'll be told, like really take time and hunt on LinkedIn for, a black female software engineer. Like
Mm-hmm.
don't just take all the resumes for all these white guys from Stanford, like hunt for someone who might bring something different to the table. And like that's
Yeah.
how HR teams can diversify, and it depends on the leadership direction. They have to be told to do that. That takes longer.
Right. And
Um,
oftentimes they
I
have a DEI person whose job is to make sure they do that sort of thing.
Maybe, yeah. And I think I totally agree that it's an education problem at the root, but I do think it's a multifaceted problem. I don't
Yes.
think there's one solution. And I think for me, working as a woman in the workplace, I would rather see an Indian woman lead a meeting
Mm-hmm.
than to never see a woman lead a meeting.
Yeah.
And it does make a difference.
Yes.
So to me as a white woman, so I think that this is just one component of solving the problem that
Yes.
Trump has unfortunately made into it's kind of like a niche part of an HR
Mm-hmm.
team's role.
Yeah.
And I think blowing it up and saying it's destroying our corporate culture when in fact it can be part of solving the problem and is really just kind of
Right.
humming in the background, I think is a disappointment and will affect people's experience at work.
For sure. And yes, it's a small thing to see an Indian woman leading a meeting rather than no woman ever leading a meeting. But we need 8-year-old girls to see a woman leading a meeting and thinking, "Wow, that
Right.
could be me. I could be leading a meeting. I could be leading meetings. I could be
Right.
leading groups of people."
But when I was growing up, my mom brought me to her meetings, which I I don't know why when I look
Yeah.
back on that, maybe she was trying to empower me. And um, I was an 8-year-old girl looking at
Yeah.
women, including my mother, leading meetings. So, or you see women on TV as like,
Hmm.
little girls walking past and her parents are watching CNBC Money or just
Right.
something, they're not interested in. But there's a woman on the TV. So these are very subtle things. And
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I don't, yeah. But
It's for sure, and I'm not sure Hollywood does a great job. They do a tokenized version of that, but I think that you need to see it in real life. Like
right.
my wife is a really strong leader, and she has no problem doing that. When we first met, she was like a person I worked with at a hotel, and by the time I left, she was running the whole thing, and she grew up with her. Not with her grandmother, but like she was very, very close to her grandmother, who was the governor of a state. And so she was with her
Wow.
grandmother all day, where, and this is back in, this is back in the 70s when, it was very rare in Latin America. This is in El Salvador for women to be in
Yeah,
politics at
wow.
all. And so it was always her grandmother, and everybody else in the room was a man, and her grandmother's in charge of everyone, telling everybody what to do. And that was, she spent years witnessing this firsthand, and it made all the difference in the world, I'm sure. But yeah,
Right.
we need to get there. But the other big thing that has to be said, the other elephant in the room, is that we need engineering development of kids, both boys and girls, and it's definitely every race on Earth, every ethnicity, because we need lots of engineers in the future, and we're failing
Mm-hmm.
as a society to produce
Mm-hmm.
engineers. The solution is
Right.
actually something akin to DEI. The solution is to get everybody involved, because you never know who's got a knack for it. And
That's true.
if the culture tells somebody that, this is not for you, that
Mm-hmm.
that potential genius, engineering genius, will never find out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I think the question here is should companies, particularly the biggest companies in the world who are carrying the US economy, do they have an obligation to play a role in solving that problem? And so
for sure.
um, now they're saying we're done, we're over it. Some are
Yeah.
holding to it. Maybe they think it will increase the quality of their tech products. I know
Yeah.
that bias is a big issue with AI, and if you have engineers who are asking the AI different questions because they come from a different background, maybe they could find bias or
Yeah.
find gaps in the quality, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I don't. It's tough.
it's tough, and I to belabor the point, I think that the way that Apple and Google and Amazon and Meta and all these other companies can have the biggest impact is they should have big programs in place that go out there and get kids to get excited
Hmm.
about engineering. That's what they
True.
can do, more than just like have an HR person who's going around making sure that when you do job searches, you find, people who
Right.
check these boxes. We need, as a society, they will need engineers in the future. They're the ones who benefit as a company, and
Hmm.
they're making, we're talking about how much Amazon is making. Apple's making bank too. So is Meta. These companies making billions of dollars of profit per quarter, and they can afford to go out and help with the
Right.
educational aspects of this. My son Kevin has got a startup called Chatterbox that is an educational product around AI for kids, and it's for 8 years old and up. And it's like, why is a little startup like his the one that's working so hard to get kids to really understand AI?
Right.
Why
I
is
do
Google
think
not involved?
Microsoft or Google, they do it. Like, let's say they'll go into a disadvantaged community and give the whole school laptops, but
Yeah,
there is a benefit to them where now they're breeding a new generation that grew up, using a Mac. So it's kind of like a
right.
customer acquisition thing, but I guess it's okay. They can get something from it if they want.
Yeah.
And it would be very exciting for that school to have a brand new set of Macs. So
The
yeah,
school
I
doesn't need
agree with
Macs or
you.
Chromebooks, though. The school needs curriculum that teaches them how to do engineering.
Yeah,
What they do with those
the
Macs,
school needs
and
money.
but exactly, they need money, but they need direction, because this third grade teachers don't have a clue about how to do this, and so they end up taking these
No,
Chromebooks and Macs and iPads, and they're just playing games and doing like useless. They're learning to be consumers, and that's the
right.
opposite of what kids should be learning when it comes to computers.
Mhm.
We don't need to teach kids to be consumers and of content on
Right,
mobile devices.
right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
so.
this is just so many issues. We could never solve them all. But
Well, speaking of that whole thing. California's got a new. Speaking of kids and AI, California's got a new bill that they're proposing that would require companies to explicitly label AI products and tell kids that AI isn't human. That when they're talking to this voice, that's not a human voice. And I think it's both very interesting that a governmental body is interested in this topic, which I'm very passionate about. I've been writing about this for a
Hmm.
long time, but it's also kind of ridiculous because, like, what's a label going to do? Like, they have in California, they have labels. They have a law that says that if there's any cancerous materials inside a building, you have to have a sign outside the building that says there's cancerous materials inside the building. And
Hmm.
so every single building in California has a sign that says, because it's like somewhere in the building, there's going to be something that causes cancer. And so it's just ridiculous. And everybody has just learned to gloss over and ignore all this signage. And I think this will have the same effect. But I do think it's a really interesting point, because
Right.
you have this product called Character AI, which teenagers are using and as a friend and as a boyfriend or a girlfriend or something like that, as well as just a companion. And you have all these lonely, isolated kids who grew up on screens, and they're having a relationship with this chatbot, and it's really unhealthy. And it's a problem that I think most people over the age of 20 or 30 don't even think about, and aren't really aware of.
Yeah, I think when you first said on Twit one time we were on it, and you were like, I think it should be illegal for an AI to simulate a human and to deceive people into thinking it's a human. And I was like, like I thought that was a cool idea and totally not the direction that the industry is going.
Oh,
I like this warning label thing. It's to me, it's a good analogy is less the cancer on the building and more kind of like with juice, it says like,
mm-hmm.
oh, this is apple juice, but then they
Yeah,
added like actually it's 1% from apples, and so you're not
yes,
drinking the juice thinking like, oh, this is good for me. It made you realize like you think it's juice, but it's not from a fruit,
right,
which is kind of similar to me as
right,
like you think you're talking to a human, but it's not a human. So it's I do think it can
right,
be effective in changing your relationship to something if done
right.
correctly and can be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best or one of the best opinion columns I've ever written was on this topic, and it was for Fast Company a bunch of years ago, and it was basically a targeted at parents. And it's because back then people were kind of making their kids say please and thank you to their you know Echo, Amazon Echo, and all these home devices that were big back then. And the whole point of my column was that no, don't do that. Don't teach them to be polite. It's a machine. It's not a person. And why do we want to
Mm,
teach kids to be polite to people? Because people have feelings and they are worthy of consideration and deserve our respect. And so if you teach kids to do that for machines, what are
interesting.
we saying about those machines? And so I think kids should be as rude and nasty at machines as possible. And people think, wait a minute. You have kids, you want to get them in the habit when they're speaking to an adult voice okay, so now the kid is a machine. You want their software running without regard to why they're doing what they're
Right.
doing. I say no. Let kids be
Okay.
as
Wow.
horrible and abusive to machines as possible. They should be as abusive to the machine as they can be to a toaster. If a toaster isn't working and the kid says, "Oh, you dumb toaster," totally acceptable, right? And I think it's okay to call Alexa dumb
Yeah.
too, because it's not a person. It doesn't have feelings. It
Got it.
doesn't deserve
Okay.
respect. And
Whoa.
yeah. So anyway, that was my
I'm
column, and I think
reacting.
that was a good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am. It is a good. It's a thought-provoking take. Like I'm one of those people where I used to kind of like jokingly get mad at my husband for yelling at the Alexa and being really rude to quote
Yeah.
unquote her.
Yeah.
And I do like that your approach would, put more value on the human. The
Yeah.
problem is that when you're yelling nasty things in the house, it changes the energy of the house. Like
Yes.
you're now have you have expletives, you have
Right.
rude things. Like just it affects the human negatively more than the machine.
Right.
Like it's you're lashing out, you're lashing out to someone who couldn't care less, and you're
Mm-hmm.
just teaching the humans to absorb that language is
Right.
possible and to come out of their parents' mouth, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I
Yes.
I don't agree.
I think the right way to interact with an AI is just issue commands and make it obey. And basically, you don't want to upset other people who are listening to you. Deliver loud noises with emotional content because it affects us as
Yeah.
people. But I think it's saying please and thank you is misguided. It's kind of like um, if so you're married, you love your husband, um, you tell your husband you love him. What if you tell everybody you love them? Like, what is that? How does that affect that sentiment when you say it to your
Yes, it
husband? He's just another
dilutes the
person.
sentiment.
Exactly.
I know what you're
We
saying, but I think
Yeah.
you shouldn't be as rude as possible. You can just be clinical with it. Like,
Yes. Well,
just say like, Alexa, what is the weather? If
yes.
she gives you the weather for El Salvador and you're in Seattle, you
Yeah.
don't need to lash out. Like, we don't need to teach people to lash out. Like, you should just
Right.
not use your Alexa, and it should be a bad
Right.
product. You don't need to be like weirdly
Yeah.
abusive to this object in your home.
Yes.
That would be
Okay.
my
So one
take.
point for
But
civility.
he agreed with
Okay.
you. I don't know if it's a male. Yeah, I don't know if it's like a male versus female thing. I mean, we
Yeah.
were kind of like jokingly like going back and forth on this issue, and he was kind of like, "Who cares?" And I was like, "Well, I don't want to hear it." So,
I just
I don't
think
know.
that there should be equality between all the non-human objects in the house. So whatever's acceptable,
Yes.
for parents to let their kids say and how they interact. People talk to things. So, they kind of talking to themselves, kind of talking to whatever. I mean, dogs and cats, those are sentient beings, right? Like I would argue that
Hmm.
you want to be sweet to them. You don't want to be yell at them and stuff like that. But ordinary household objects, sneakers, whatever the rules are for talking to those things should be the same. Just because this object has a voice doesn't mean you suddenly treat it like a person.
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous. And I think we're going
Please
to
and
get there
thank
anyway.
you is a bit much. I
Yeah.
do think what comes out of your mouth affects you though, and
Yes.
the more positive and supportive, the
Yeah.
better it feeds you. So you don't want
Yes.
to sacrifice your well-being on manufacturing rage over the Alexa.
Right.
But yeah, you don't need to say please and thank you if that doesn't help you get the request through, which it doesn't.
As long as everybody understands why they're doing it. I mean, I do it myself. If I get a great answer from a voice-based AI, I'll be like, thank you. And I say that for me. Like I say it because I just feel like expressing
Yeah,
that,
say it for
right?
you.
So as long as I just worried about think of the children. I'm worried about the children growing up and thinking there's
I
not much
know.
difference between an AI and a person. And there's
Right.
every difference. And I think we should teach that. Yeah, that's
I
all.
like it. I think it's good debate. No, it's a good debate, and the fact that it even produced a response to me is a sign of a good point. So
Yes. Okay,
I
great.
it's interesting. All
Great.
right, so this week we had a lot going on with Trump's anti-EV agenda, as he would say, the
Yeah.
anti-EV mandate. In more positive terms, he would say slowing, not requiring manufacturers to create a certain number of EVs, which is his big issue. I think it's overblown because
Yeah.
there is no push to make them, only sell EVs until that's feasible. So um, but anyway, the way he's doing that this week is by freezing funds for charging stations. So this
Yeah.
the first day in office, he froze the dispersal of any remaining funds from the $5 billion bucket Biden allocated for charging stations. But the
Hmm.
problem with that is nearly all of it was already out, so that was
Yeah.
kind of useless. Um, Today, he actually froze the use of the funds that were dispersed, so that was a big one.
I wonder about this president of ours. Does he care about things like this? I mean, is the point to make his followers, his fans, believe that he's sticking it to the left? Is that the point?
Yes.
And so he doesn't really care if it's, you know, if he didn't really get
Right.
concessions from Mexico or Canada over, and by calling off the tariffs temporarily, he just cares that they think that he was tough on them and that they made concessions into this thing. And this is
Hmm.
another example. It's like, it doesn't, I think he would, even if he really knew, maybe he does know, but even if he, if he really knew that those funds are already out there, probably wouldn't care as long as his fans, believe that
Hmm.
he's, doing something that is going to create liberal tears.
Yeah, I think it's part of his overall messaging, which he's been effective at doing. The one funny slash disheartening detail is the new Department of Transportation director who replaced Pete Buttigieg is this guy, Pete Duffy, who was a star on The Real World and met his wife on The Real World. So this guy directed his minions to email all the states a memo that said, hey, those charging plans that you spent a year crafting, that you had community meetings about, that energized your department, that created a whole new infrastructure in your town. Yeah, all that, you have to stop that
Mm-hmm.
right now. Even if you've broken ground on the site, shovels down. And so that's
Wow.
where all the states are right now. I will say there has been some bipartisan pushback to the creation of the charging network because it has
Yeah.
taken longer to come online than people
Yeah.
thought. So the data I was looking at today is there are only 51 chargers up and running from that.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot more contracts awarded. So like you have to do a lot to install an EV charger, especially a
Yeah.
level 3 fast charger.
Right.
Each of them costs $1 million a piece. They have
Yeah.
huge power needs.
I
So you
didn't know
have
that.
to
Wow.
work with a lot of, yeah, you have to work with, that's why you don't have them in your homes because no one's
Yeah.
going to spend $1 million and no one's electrical grid, no one's electrical panel can support that. So
Yeah.
we're mostly talking about public chargers here, and that's the
Yeah.
government's involvement. So it's very complex, and I think it just is taking longer. Um, but yeah, they're saying like pencils down. They're going to reissue a new guidance for how to use the funds. And interestingly, Tesla is the third largest recipient of the funds. So they have been awarded
Yes.
$31 million to build. So the states have to choose a provider, right, to create the chargers. Like states aren't
Yeah.
EV charging companies,
Right.
and so Tesla has
Yeah.
been awarded $31 million to build more superchargers, and that's I guess being revoked from them, and that we'll see how that shows up in their earnings. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just frustrating to have something cut down, and it's hard to think that uh, they're going to build it up because they have they're going to revise the program, which could be good, but I know I know they don't really want the
Yeah.
funds used for EV chargers, so it doesn't feel
Right.
like a positive step forward. It feels like a lot of wasted work.
I feel like there's a lot of waste. Yeah. Yes. Um, in general happening, and I feel like almost everything that we're doing, we're going to be reversing it in some way or
Hmm.
another in a few short years.
Yeah.
Um, Emily, we're getting close to the our time to stop, but we wanted to rip through a few quick things before we end the podcast.
Hmm.
One of which is Doge. What are your thoughts on Doge? Speaking of the Trump
Ah,
administration doing weird things.
too many thoughts on Doge. Very uncomfortable. Definitely makes it seem like I think it's inappropriate that a businessman is being considered a leader or an expert on sociological issues, governmental issues, international relations. I think this is a big overreach, and it's a failure of society to assume that because people are successful in business that they are appropriate to build a society. I think we have
Right.
completely conflated the two, and that this is just the peak of that between Trump and Musk. And I think that is a big problem in our society, and it's very uncomfortable to see people who have conflicts of interest and a lack of expertise have the purse strings. So, because what
They,
the government does is really related to its money, and we have the wrong person over the money.
multiple presidents have tried to do something sort of similar, Nixon, Reagan, and it just was such a morass to make it happen. And this is the first time where they're like, okay, we're going to go right to the computers. We're going to lock out the people who normally use those computers. We're going to give ourselves the exclusive admin access to those computers, and we're just going to start cutting stuff and shutting off
Yeah.
money and all that kind of stuff. So my only two thoughts about this that have, there have been many good thoughts expressed on different social networks and different publications. But my main two thoughts is, first of all, to your point about CEOs being politicians, that people assume that if they can run a company, they can, let's run the U.S. like a business. Elon Musk actually said that. Like he literally said, "Oh, the government's just a big company. That's all it is," and he's wrong.
Hmm.
One of the ways that he's wrong is that Tesla and X are his. They belong to him to a certain extent. The United States government belongs to us, and I would guess that if you took a poll right now, you'd be north of 80% of people who own the government, who own that data, who own the process, who own all of it, would be against it. I think a huge number of Republicans
Yeah.
are kind of like, this is like, what are they doing? I didn't vote for this. I
Right.
voted for border security and
Right.
lower the price of eggs. I didn't vote for a bunch of kids going in there and sort of like just cutting off the
Yeah.
funds to all these services, and Trump supporters are going to be disproportionately affected. That's the other point I wanted to make. I mean, if you look at his promise to end the Department of Education, well, the Department of what we're talking about is funds from the country, by which I mean from California and New York, the states that pay more than they get from the federal government, and those funds going to red states that voted for Trump. So they're going to have to continue to
Hmm.
run a public school system minus 25% of the funding they used to. So again, Trump
Right.
supporting states are the ones that are going to have to make up a 25%. And so anyway, so much of what they're doing, they feel, it's supposed to be draining the swamp, and what they're really doing is they
Hmm.
are upsetting a system in which blue states fund red states, and I think the red states are going to find out what a problem
Hmm.
that is, and so
Well, sadly, I mean, I think actually a lot of Republicans are really excited about what Elon Musk is doing because of the way that he's positioning it. So, like when he
yeah,
as he tweeted, put USAID through the wood chipper, he was tweeting examples of why he did that, and it was like, oh,
yeah,
the U.S. government made a $70,000 payment to Ireland in 2022, and he
yes,
said it funded a quote unquote transgender opera, and it
yes,
was like to a cultural organization in
right,
Ireland. So it's like,
and
okay, you're undermining billions of aid to people and you're creating rage because of like this $70,000 payment. So it's the way he's
mm-hmm,
positioning it is gaining a
right.
lot of support. So I think people love it.
And it's ironic because it's like you have the idea of the richest man in human history knocking food out of the mouths of starving children. It's not a good
Oof.
look. And so
Oof. It
I
makes
think,
me sick when you say it
yeah,
like that.
yeah, it's a kind of weird thing. But again, I think the I don't know what the tired cliche is, proof is in the pudding, something like that. That we're going to find out how this affects people. People don't realize how much they depend on the quote unquote deep state, especially red states. And so I think that as like
Yeah.
my favorite subreddit, I think we mentioned on a previous episode, is leopards ate my face. Leopards ate my face. Check it out. It's great. It's all about people who voted for
Yeah.
Trump feeling regretful. Um, Okay, well, I have a quiz. I think we got to wrap it up, but I had a quick question. You filed a FOIA request. Did that ever come through, or is the slowdown in the federal government like harming that process?
Yeah, so I filed two FOIAs. The one we talked about was for my
Yep.
personal data. Haven't heard back. The other one I filed was about the FTC's investigation into GM for using driver data. I wanted to know
Yeah.
what data they found and how they found it was used, and they promptly denied me.
Ah.
So I'm down one FOIA, and I have one outstanding that they haven't acknowledged. So I don't know about this FOIA process, but that's the update.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. I just wanted to leave people. Hopefully, people are listening to this over the weekend. I think like the Doge stuff and all of this is creating a lot of stress. And I mean, I tweeted about like yoga or just like doing things that just breathe, relax. Like everything's gonna be okay. And I just want to leave people with that. If you're listening to this over the weekend, like please relax and think about something else. After you turn this off.
Yeah, the Super Bowl, for example. But yeah, I will
Yeah,
second that. And as somebody who travels a lot, I find that travel is a great a great
the
antidote to some
best.
of this stuff. Which is to say, specifically, we have to learn how to resist the temptation that technology wants to put us in, which is to live with the whole world's troubles. And we each
Yeah,
individually have our own troubles. It's not easy to be a human being. And to the greatest extent possible, live your own life and try not to live the pains and woes of the entire planet, because that's too much, and it's unnatural, and it's a brand new thing that's only existed for a couple of decades. So re-engage with your own people in your life, your own environment, your own community, your own uh, you know uh, passions, and try as best you can to stop doom scrolling, because that is not good for you. So I
hmm
second that. That's a great notion to wrap it up with.
So you have made it through another episode of Unicorn Roast, podcast with Mike Elgan and Emily Forlini. This podcast has no paywall, no ads, and no sponsors. All we ask is a 5-star rating, a glowing review, and please tell your friends. So you can follow us, subscribe, and get links to the show at our website, unicornroast.com, and we will see you next week.
Unicorn Roast.